Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Mark just said he's ready as he's ever going to be.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
We started the recording ASAP.
That's right. Because I don't want to be less ready
Then you are, right?
a couple minutes later. That was the moment to start.
Did I hit play in the right time? Or record?
Oh, yeah. It was the right moment.
Good.
It was the right moment. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations.
and this is the right topic for today.
Is it?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
It is the topic for today.
It is the topic for today, so therefore the right one.
Yes. So the topic is we're going to talk about artificial intelligence.
Yes, we are.
And Mark is excited.
I am.
Because,
I am. I think it's good because in some ways you're going to recognize who really knows what they're talking about with the artificial intelligence of sorts.
Mm-hmm. This guy who wrote this blog post.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then the ability to recognize our differences is a good thing. I think it's another topic where we can express our differences in such a way that says, "Hey, what about this? And what about that?" And yeah. I think so much of it can sound like science fiction.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like some people are going to say, oh, wow, artificial intelligence. And other people are going to say, oh, well, this might be something I can skip. You know what I'm saying? It has that kind of feel to it. Just based on that science fiction, it's like, that's not everybody's thing. Yeah. I think of Marvel, you know, and, you know, what was Iron Man, Tony Stark. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's just kind of an interesting topic to think about, and how what was the guy that he created?
Yeah, well, Vision.
Vision, yes.
But Vision fought that other guy. So that both of those characters are based on a fictionalized version of AI, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of comes to mind for me, you know.
Yeah.
And Captain America wins out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Always.
But no, seriously, share your thoughts.
Yeah, so there's this blog I really like called Wait But Why by a man named Tim Urban, and he just writes long form posts about passion topics of his where he'll just deep dive.
Sure.
And he is not a scientist, and he's not, he's just curious. And so he'll put together these posts about things that write about them in a way that to me is very appealing. Like, it's very interesting. Sure. A little bit quirky, a little bit funny. He uses stick figure drawings to illustrate his point and stuff. And so he wrote about artificial intelligence. Big long post. He split into two. But I've just found it so fascinating. And I particularly, just to spoil the lead, like, kind of want to talk about it from the perspective of believers, right? And believe, we know who our higher power is.
Sure.
And kind of how does that work? That kind of idea. Like, I think that will be the fun part to talk about. But in order to get there, I want to do some setup. So essentially, we're on this progress bar chart, right?
Sure.
Where from, the time we were created until now, we've been progressing in terms of our human intelligence. Right? Okay. And
do you
to
see
clarify
that?
No.
Okay,
to clarify that, and this is what he describes in the thing too, is over each, whatever grouping of time you want to call it, right? Yeah. We're better able to leverage our previous knowledge.
Sure.
And that's the thing that's growing exponentially. So he's using the term exponential.
Sure.
So he's essentially saying, one of the illustrations he uses that's kind of funny is if you went back to the year 1700, I think that's the number he used.
Sure. And
you take a guy and you put him in a time machine and bring him back with you to now, he would be so blown away with what's happened in those 200 years. Well, however many years.
Sure.
that he would die. He would literally die. He would just be blown away and die, right?
Yep.
Now this is all fictional,
that's
the joke, right? But
right.
now if you went back to, he after he died, he came back and said, I want to do that same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So he goes back to his time, and then he leapfrogs, into the year 1500, and brings a guy up to 1700 and says, look at all, and the guy's like, wow, yeah, lots of things have changed or whatever, but it's not a die level of progress.
I hear
the way he describes it, right? It's like, okay, things have changed, but it's not mind-blowing to the degree that he would die. In order for the 1700 man to cause a die progress level, he'd have to go back, let's say, 1,000 years, right?
Sure.
So in this guy's blog post, he's talking about hunter-gatherer, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you ascribe to that idea or not. But the point is, this guy, he's beating his chest or whatever, and you bring him to 1700, he might die at the level of progress, right?
Sure.
Assuming he could understand it, that idea. The point is, it's exponential growth for each generation, or, each, die progress level or whatever. And so the premise of this blog post is that we're at the edge of this essentially cliff straight up, right? Because we have continually gotten better at building on top of the foundations that we've built with our technology, with our quote-unquote intelligence. To answer your previous question, I definitely don't think we're more... I don't know what the author would argue. I think he might argue a similar thing, but not quite. That we're basically the same intelligent. It's just that we have the advantage of technology and and keeping track of all the things we've done. And then by keeping track, we can now build on those things. So nobody alive today truly understands how every part of a computer works.
Gotcha.
Right? So we basically this is a microchip. I know you plug the microchip in here, and I understand, let's say the Wi-Fi part of a computer, and I know how that works to a large degree, right? And that's the part I work on, but I don't know how a microchip works, or vice versa.
Sure. But there are individuals that do.
That understand parts of the laptop.
Right.
Yes.
Each part. Yes, as a human race, there are individuals that understand.
Theoretically, yes. Yes, because we're continually
designers, if we would,
improving on it. Yeah. Yes. But but the point is, there's no one human that could, build a computer from complete scratch. They would depend on the existing knowledge and,
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, we're at this point where we're now working on what's called artificial intelligence, and this is kind of where the cliff can come into play, depending on whether you believe it or not. And so he describes, a spectrum of artificial intelligence, which he calls calibers.
Yep.
Where caliber 1 is artificial narrow intelligence, and that's essentially where artificial intelligence kicks in one singular vertical.
Yep.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. His example was the aspect of creating a computer that can beat our best chess player.
Yeah.
But all that computer does, all that intelligence is designed for, is to play chess. Mm-hmm. It can't necessarily do your financial report.
Yeah, it can't tell if you look pretty or sleepy or groggy. Or,
exactly.
Whatever.
It's not going to necessarily read your emotions or, scan your eye retina or all that stuff. And from a security level, it's just designed to play chess.
Yeah. And to that degree, we have, and he calls it ANI, artificial narrow intelligence.
Sure.
And to that degree, we have
one specific area.
Yep. We have ANI all over the place in our world. He also goes on later to describe like the algorithms that feed you your social feed on Facebook, as well as the ad system where you look at something here and you go to another site and it serves you some similar thing, right? Like there's all kinds of artificial intelligence at play, and machine learning is a new term that we're calling it, where basically you can teach a computer to learn about a specific thing and then make judgments that are theoretically better than a human, because they have all this input and they can, you teach it over time. You essentially say
it's basically like the schedule in your phone. In other words,
Yeah.
if you type a name in, it will give you the last time you saw that person or something along that line, and it will plug that in, almost giving you the exact time you need, so you're not having to scroll through to find.
Yeah, it's another great example. ANI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so essentially, that we're there already, and that's nobody's wowed by that. Although really, we're not wowed because it doesn't seem that impressive, but if you kind of understood it truly, you would go, wow. This is powerful, but almost there should be a level of like scary, right? And
exactly.
I think that's... Yes.
Yeah, because I'll admit, I tend to, it's not that I'm, what was the first one, kind of bored with it or not unimpressed. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm not sure I always like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand how it works because I've done it over and over again. And, for my schedule, I'll meet a person typically at the same time. But it's like each time it happens, I still think about it. It's like, I'm not sure I like this.
Mark has not welcomed our robot overlords.
And in all honesty, I'm not even sure I agree with the human progress as a line.
Sure, yeah.
I would see it as as secular or as cycles. I think, I'm not saying, I think all intelligence is still the same based on creation, but I think there are times when we see people uniting. And I would say there's still times today where we can go back and say, okay, we don't necessarily understand with intelligence or without intelligence how they did that. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, we can think of, the Egyptians and the pyramids, and we recognize that slave labor type dynamic and more people together. But yet, I still think there's parts of history that when we look back, there are those who would say, oh, alien life forces came to make this possible. Yeah. Because we can't figure out how they did it.
And that kind of further enhances the point, which is we've always, again, how I say it, we've always been the same level of intelligence. That's how we were created. The difference is they didn't have a way to record how that was created. Sure. And then the next generation go, oh, if they could build a pyramid this way, we could build it this way and make it better. Yeah. Where now nothing goes away, essentially. Right? Sure. Like
information.
Right. Information about how, right?
Right.
And again, blueprints are created, whether you call that, software or whatever that looks like. Blueprints are created so that I don't have to truly understand how a pyramid is made. I just plug in this blueprint and the thing gets built. Does that make sense?
Sure.
The various teams or the various manufacturing plants, whatever, they come together and they produce this thing that I don't have to know how to make.
Sure.
But they didn't have that then.
Right.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, one could argue the Egyptians maybe didn't want that to be recorded. They wanted it to look, I don't. Who knows, right? I'm not an Egyptian, but
no.
But I think that again, that's the point of this post. Well, agree or not? I just think it's fascinating, but
I agree. It's fascinating.
Yes.
Don't misunderstand.
All right.
Yeah.
So ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, is it's kind of happening all over the place, but
all around us.
Many people, many organizations are actively working on the next level, which is artificial general intelligence.
Sure.
And this is basically human level artificial intelligence.
Sure.
Essentially a computer that can think like us. And what does that mean? Well, think like us in every way. Not just can play a chess against us, but can also figure out if you're sad or happy or, but also can determine, look at a thing and say that's a shadow or that's a, an actual 3D picture or that's a 2D picture. Like there's just so many things that we just do intuitively and naturally.
Sure.
He describes like the things that are hard for us are easy for computers, right? Like big calculations, stuff like that. The things that are easy for us are basically impossible for computers. Those natural intuitive systems where you like raise your arm in front of you and you look at it and it's just like all of that was for free. You just, there's your arm, you look at it, put it back down.
Sure.
And it's like that was required no thought, no effort, and yet for a computer it's impossibly difficult, right?
Sure.
Although, they're getting better at animatronics and computers and robots and all that, and they're getting, like, if you ever seen the Boston dynamic videos where they create robots. Yeah,
I'm familiar with it based on, and that was where I was going. It's like the robotics part of it is the most difficult part.
Yeah.
Because our
it's
bodies.
not though.
Well, I'm saying from a muscular
Yeah.
standpoint, to be able, how our bodies are designed as one muscle tensions, there's equal and opposite relaxation in the other. And it's been very hard for robotics to duplicate that, which always makes, robots look stiff or, that, and that's just something that I've been fascinated with over time, is that progression.
Yeah. As they look less and less stiff.
Yes, to where they're becoming smoother and that kind of thing, from a human replica standpoint. Yeah.
And they are basically leveraging AI to have the robot teach itself.
Sure.
So essentially, when I jump and I fall, figure out all the math that was involved in that and mark that as a fail. That doesn't mean you don't, and then you change a variable and you jump again.
Sure.
Still fail. Okay.
What needs to.
Right. And that's just so much math. And we, our brain's just like, I give up.
Right.
But for a computer, it's like, you just keep trying, do the math, mark out what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
And you can, I think, visualize in your head how that can learn, right? Like it can adapt to go, okay, this is how you jump.
Yep.
And then they put a box in front of it. Now start over, right? Like
exactly.
And they've been doing that for decades now. And so they got, robots that will, like, again, the Boston Dynamics videos where they can do forward flips, backward flips, jump across, holes, jump up and down boxes, do synchronized dances.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. They got that little dog robot that can, open doors and go in and rescue something, come back out.
Yeah.
And those are real. Like, those are things that in use right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's definitely not artificial general intelligence, which is intelligence at the level of a human. You might describe that as intelligence of an ant, maybe.
Sure. It's still fairly narrow.
Yeah.
In the concept of the human body.
Yeah.
In
other certainly words, broadening.
Yes, no doubt.
But yes,
and I think part of that too is the advantage over computers or robots or that kind of thing is humans would give up on many tasks before they'd learn something as human, I myself included. I'm not gonna do something that requires me to fall 752 times.
Well, you need motivation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's the key difference. Right. You could spend Edison, right? Invented the light bulb. In the famous stories, how many he threw in the trash? I don't know, whatever.
Right.
Lots.
Right.
Basically, that's 700, whatever,
right.
We can, but we need motivation.
Precisely. I would admit that.
So I think, you just touched on one of the biggest concerns and or fears of artificial intelligence is that they don't need motivation.
Sure.
And basically you can program to do a thing and they'll do it. And they don't care. They're not thinking. They're not having feelings about it yet. Right? No, according to this theory. And the scary thing there, right, I think this is a level of artificial intelligence that most people are afraid of right now, is not an intelligence that's smarter than us in every way, like artificial general intelligence where they're essentially as smart as a human. Because that would be scary, but that would be a different kind of scary. What we're scared of is a dumb AI doing smart things.
Sure.
Right? So they launch all the nuclear codes because they think, whatever.
There's a perceived threat.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. That is the thing that freaks us out about AI, and where we have it continually train itself, and it trains itself into a position where we have to get rid of this human thing because they're, basically cockroaches on this earth, ruin, destroying.
Want to play a game?
What's that?
It's a movie.
Which one?
It's the one where the computer takes over the intelligence and wants to send and the kid gets on. Oh, I forget the name of it, but yeah, it's never mind. Yeah, you'd have to be.
It's gonna bug me.
It's okay. You'd have to be.
Movie
yeah. You'd have to be my age to get that.
Is it like Tron?
No, it's not. But yeah,
it would be 2001.
Go back with it, but moving along. Alien. I apologize. That was what came to mind.
That's fair. No, now I really want to know. But yes, essentially, right? And there's actually a lot of new movies. There's one called Ex Machina.
Okay. No.
And it's essentially an AI robot that basically learns and learns and learns, and then said basically humans are the problem. And it's in a an environment where that's just two people. It's a robot and a human.
Sure.
And at first she's very affectionate, and eventually she's like fake affectionate.
Sure.
As she's like trying to figure out how to get rid of this human. That's a problem, right?
Yeah. No,
so that's the thing.
That's typically where those kind of movies go, is it comes full circle, and it's like humans are the problem again.
Yeah.
Because we're the aggressors, and we're trying to, take over, and it's like this other thing. We see it as an enemy, but yet it's really just a kind, loving thing that's just looking to promote its own behalf as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And artificial intelligence gets things wrong all the time, obviously, already. And an example that I've heard in the past is essentially artificial intelligence that can read facial expressions or whatever. Like, even your phone scan thing doesn't do as well with black skin. It's like epic fail. You only had white people in the room designing that, and it works great for them.
Sure.
Right? And so then it basically marks that person as, no, you're not allowed in your phone. You're a bad person, right? If it, kind of put it essentially zeros and ones, black and white. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
And so you take that to a scale that's scary and it's problematic, right? Like, oops, we didn't include that scenario. Right. So that's kind of the general, I think, fear, right?
Sure.
Is, dumb AI doing smart things.
Sure.
Or vice versa, smart AI doing dumb things, right?
Yeah. That creates the fear.
Yeah, and what he describes in this post, he's saying we're kind of completely missing the point, because those are scary things, but what's more scary is an AI that's more intelligent than us. Mm-hmm. And then we now have, essentially robot overlords, right? Like, we have to abide by their rules, because they make the rules. They can turn the water off, they can turn the water on. They have access to everything, right?
Sure.
Theoretically.
That's the idea.
Yeah, exactly. And so essentially the theory is, once they reach artificial general intelligence, because of the advantages they already have over us, like not needing to be motivated to continue on a task, or also he talks about the power it requires to the power our brain uses is essentially pretty minimal, but we have access to power much greater than that to feed to them.
Sure.
Right? So they can, there's just a lot of advantages. There's also disadvantages, but...
No doubt.
But with those advantages, they're not going to stay at artificial general intelligence at AGI level for very long, right? Because we're now in the exponential state, and they're teaching and learning themselves. So, they have the advantage... again, this is the theory. This is the, where they can continually improve, where we can't. We're kind of bound to our quote-unquote hardware software, and we're kind of limited. Although we can build on what the last guy built, which is what I was talking about, we're still limited to that.
Sure.
Where an AI essentially is not limited, is the idea. Right. And so then you get into what they call artificial superintelligence, and that's basically the one level above, human general intelligence to infinity, right?
Right.
And
it's interesting at that level. I like it's the line that leads in, of course, Oxford philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
So in my perspective, that this is philosophy.
That's right.
Yeah. To a certain degree,
there is, right. There's so much philosophy.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the part that we have to wrestle with.
Yes.
Because I think we can, and I guess that's where it comes back to, for me, it can almost come back to Marvel. Because it's really, it's philosophy. It can even be entertainment, to think about. And let's be perfectly honest, there are people out there, not necessarily us, but I'd say smarter than us, even you, but to the point that they get paid to think about what could be next.
Yeah. Yep.
And from a philosophy standpoint. And I think that's a great thing. Don't get me wrong, but like you say, that's not me.
Yeah.
And so but I think I think I enjoy when I read something along that line that says, okay, yes, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Philosophy. Yep.
Philosophy.
Yep. Yeah, and because AI, the people working on those next levels, there are so many unknowns.
Sure.
Right. There's essentially a very large, broad spectrum of people working in this field.
Sure.
Philosophers and scientists.
Yep.
And who knows what else, right? But
right.
The idea is, you got to get philosophers in there. So, and
well, and in some ways, I think it lends to your point. I think philosophers create that motivation to a certain degree.
Yeah.
This could be. And that excites people to say, wow. And then your scientists, your designers, it's like, okay, how can we do this? Or is this possible? And other people are automatically going to hear that. And they're going to say, this is scary. I don't like this.
Well, to be fair, there's a good contingency of philosophers and or scientists that are saying, this is scary. This is a big deal. We need to be very careful. And so it's interesting because there are contingencies of AI developers and innovators that are the first category of this is exciting. We got to get this done. This is going to be amazing. This is going to solve cancer. This is going to solve death.
Yep.
This is going to, And then there's a camp of
War Games was the name of that movie. Sorry.
War Games.
Yes.
All right,
yeah. Sorry.
That sounds familiar. I don't think I've seen it, but thank you.
No problem. I didn't want you.
So the first camp is kind of the sky is rosy or whatever,
Sure.
Sky is blue.
Yep.
Vision is rosy, whatever. The other camp is this is very dangerous, so let's do it. Let's do it, but in a way that's as careful as possible because they're still doing it, right? This other camp. There's other camps that are going to do it, so we have to try and get there as quick as possible, but in a way that is cognizant of the risks.
Sure.
And cares about the risks.
Sure.
So it's not like a hands-off type of thing because they know someone's going to put their hands on it. So let's do it in a way that's responsible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
even Tony Stark failed at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those movies are great in terms of kind of setting up the issue.
Yeah.
But Elon Musk has his hands in some different companies.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. Where he's basically one of those people that would say this is very concerning. We need to do it the right way.
Responsibly.
Whether he means that or not, that's besides the point, but that's kind of that camp.
And then even that, it's like, what is a person's motivation? Are we always as altruistic as we would like to think we are? So, to get through all of that, we're to a point where there's this artificial superintelligence that's smarter than us, and we know, are not the top dog, right? And he said ASI, artificial superintelligence, is the reason the topic of AI is such a spicy meatball. Why the words immortality and its extinction will appear in these posts multiple times, right? Because once we're not the top, they can either unlock some things that we never could, and they basically say you can be our immortal pets, right? Sure. Or they can say no, we're knocking you off the total, off the balance beam of existence. Yep. And you're not worth keeping, kind of thing. We don't know, right? So all that to say, the real question, the polarizing, is: do you think it's possible? Do you think that? Because in my, let me just share a little bit of my perspective. Go for it.
I think there's a Tower of Babel in here somewhere. Right. I hear you. And to explain that reference, the Bible, there's a Bible story where, before, the world was split up into different languages and countries or whatever, we kind of all left the boat, right? Noah's boat. I think it was after, right? And we all just stayed in the same, basically, but one big happy family. And as a result, we started to build this tower in a city called Babel. And we were very proud of it. And we said, this is going to be amazing. This is going to reach the heavens. This is going to rival anything God's ever done. And we can do this because we're so smart and we're, doing this together, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't have the limits we don't have limits, essentially. Sure. And they built, and God basically said, snap. And then, basically broke everyone up into different languages. So you were working side by side with someone laying a brick, and all of a sudden he's talking a different language. Well, that puts a hamper, right, in any kind of development process because he can't communicate, and that basically destroyed that. Right, that was the end of that, and as a result, that's how countries and nationalities formed, because the ones that could understand each other kind of separated out and said, the rest I'm not sure about, but let's go do our own thing, right?"
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying, I think there's a piece of this, right? Where,
do you?
Well, I do. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's
that's why I'm asking.
Let me have your thoughts.
Oh no, I guess I'm pragmatic to a certain degree, because I realize, for every science fiction movie, there's another apocalypse type movie, that shows, cities being overgrown by vines and everybody's back out in the countryside, and, there's no electricity. The grid is just so small, something happened. And I'm recognizing a lot of this AI is dependent upon electricity, grid, circumstances like that. And even today, I think about, third world countries at times, and that, people, I'll call it, if I may, like indigenous people who are, just out completely disconnected. And those people, in my opinion, will continue to exist the way they've always existed outside of artificial intelligence, from my perspective, because I think, AI is definitely a first world thought.
Yes.
To where we...
Yeah, but first world thoughts have impacted the whole world many times throughout history, right? So whether it's colonization...
Sure. But right. I also think, if I may, on the other end of the Bible, when we talk about Revelations, now we can talk about what John sees, and he's still talking about horses. Now, is that something that looks like a horse that's mechanized, or was he describing that from his era as something that looked like a horse? You follow me? That kind of thing. And that's kind of where
He also describes a lot of things that are nonsensical.
Right, like scorpions with heads like a lion,
like
and
bird, the size of a horse, but heads of a lion. And I'm open to that. I mean, it could a helicopter, look like a scorpion, that kind of thing. Or to stay in this AI vein, right? Like they create some sort of helicopter-like thing that for all intents and purposes, is just a big insect to us.
Sure.
It's mechanized. It's whatever. Maybe even has organic parts, right? Because, again, once you're smarter than us,
I hear you.
What's the limit? I think that's his big concern. His big, thing is just like, just so you know, we're real close to stuff you can't even imagine. Right? And I just think it's so fascinating. I don't necessarily agree, though, because, again... his point with the exponential growth is that we're about to hit a tipping point, right?
Correct.
Where, bam, it's exceeded past us, and now artificial intelligence has taken over, right?
And it continues to grow exponentially.
Yeah,
sure.
Which is the crazy thing,
Yeah.
We saw this illustration in this post where it's an animated GIF, right? Where it's water, it's the Lake Michigan, and all the drops of water in Lake Michigan, and it showed... basically animation of the time span, so like 1700, and Lake Michigan is empty.
Sure.
And what was the numbers? Hang on, I gotta...
Right there.
Here it is, yeah. It's basically calculations a second. So in it's going through 94, 2000, 2006, and we're barely filling it, and then you hit 2018 and up to 2025, and the whole lake just instantly fills. That's the power of exponential growth, which people truly can't understand unless they've experienced it in one way or another. And so that's why investments are so important, right?
Sure, very much like that.
Growth,
from where it was 21 to 25, you are correct, and then it just fills the whole lake all of a sudden.
Yeah. So that's Yeah. So in terms of once, and what this illustration fails to demonstrate is it doesn't just stop once the lake is filled, right?
Right.
To your point, the exponential growth continues to be exponential, and
Sure.
we have no idea what that looks like after that. You know,
Yeah.
the cat's out of the bag. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You know, it's like this thing's going, and you're not stopping it. You know?
Sure. So if you're not stopping it, of course, at that point, you know, I think there again, from my perspective, the sci-fi part comes into play because now we need to live on other planets and we need to, you know, develop other areas to live. And I think sometimes, some of the AI for me, granted, it's with us in a narrow form, that kind of thing currently. And I really, you know, don't necessarily have a strong issue with that. But there is a part of me that can even kind of tie some of this to like overpopulation. You know, that there is a movement that says, yes, you know, and granted, different people are going to have different, it can be a polarizing topic, you know, that yes, we don't have enough, there's too many people. You know, and I think sometimes for me, AI can be tied to that because it's about being able to end world overpopulation and hunger, you know, because something else is going to kick in and provide that balance for us that we need. And I guess that's how I see it. Sometimes it gets connected, and I'm not saying, yeah, I get that's how I see it.
Yeah. You see that as how you think it will go, you mean? Or
no, I see that as part of this model that we currently have, you know, in government, in certain movements that basically are concerned about that, you know, and I think that's a part of the development or a purpose behind it is that we can end all of these human type problems because a computer will fix it. You follow me?
Yeah.
And we can end world hunger. We can end poverty. We can end, and I'm not sure that's part of the design. For our Earth, you know, that's just my personal perspective on it. I think, and here again, I may sound, you know, resistant or anti, and I'm really not, but probably my questions or my thoughts as I've thought about it, you know, probably my questions may come across that way. And it's like, that's, you know, that's kind of, I think it's fascinating to talk about, but there again, I'm not a philosopher. So I'm okay with being able to say I'm not. And so therefore, I'm going to probably move on with some of the things that I do have the ability to recognize. And it's in some ways it can be kind of like we spoke about government. You know, I see it as bigger than I am. So I'll go on and I'll be responsible for my circle of influence. But once it gets to that level, it's like,
what's Mark going to do anyway?
I'm not even updating my phone right now. You know, it's like,
don't worry, AI will do it.
Exactly. And I hate it when they give me that new update and then it changes the other stuff that I got used to. But that's just my. But bringing it back. And then, is that your full on perspective on the, if you will, the super intelligent, artificial super intelligence?
Well, he kind of...
You said Babel. I wanted to bring it back for that.
Okay, gotcha. He kind of tips his hand a little bit in the article when he says a large contingency of, you know, people who are in this field believe this is close.
Sure.
Between, you know, artificial general intelligence, where a computer is about as intelligent as a human. The kind of the furthest projections in the mean is like 2060.
Okay.
They're saying at the latest.
Okay.
But more like 2040.
Okay.
Maybe even, you know, sooner.
Right.
Because of exponential growth. But the big sticking point is we really don't know how far we are from it. Whether it's possible. We don't know what we don't know.
Sure.
And so that's the part to me that I think I I think there's more to that than this particular article is letting on. Because this article is basically saying, this is a big deal. Everyone should be thinking about this. Like, it's so close, maybe.
Sure.
And, all the leading experts agree this is really close. And you don't even know about it.
Right.
And so that's kind of what this post is about. The way I see it is, again, I think we don't know what we don't know. And I think there's some insanely difficult things that they don't know about yet.
Sure.
And it's going to stall progress is the way I see it. Kind of that Tower of Babel, the languages.
Yeah.
It's like, well, now we got to relearn how to communicate. It took us from Babel until the internet, right? To be able to collaborate effectively. Maybe not the internet, but because I think we've been collaborating effectively with other language speakers for a long time. But I think the internet really kind of has boosted the ability to collaborate globally.
Sure.
Right. To maybe a similar degree as Babel. I don't know.
No, and I think you're exactly right in that progression. And I think, and I'm not equating the two, don't get me wrong. But when I think of AI to a certain degree, I do think of war on terror, because there has been this global connection to fight this war on terror. So therefore, information is being filtered in such a way. And, these logarithms have been created in such a way to be able to filter out all of this information in such a way that says, okay, is this threat credible? You follow me? And I think that's a part of our connected intelligence, if you will. And I think it also, the point you alluded to earlier, I think it's also can be dangerous because a person, like you said, dark skin versus light skin wasn't, a person who might be expressing a certain anti-government opinion could also be identified, in this. And I think with sometimes, I'm equating it to what Facebook and, and these other entities can do that basically filter all this information to feed you exactly what you want to hear. And for me, that's a part of this intelligence, the artificial intelligence dynamic.
That's still very much in the AI
it
department.
Is. I would agree.
In the sense, dumb computers doing smart things or vice versa.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, probably those same algorithms that would flag a terrorist or whatever probably would have caught, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington, and Hamilton.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Or,
I think that's fascinating. And
someone who is basically just recognizing
independent.
Yeah, I was just a federalist, if you were, to be able to say, this bigger government design isn't my thing. And so, that's kind of how I connect it, and I am, so back to your point though, you were talking about something that could stall this progression. Now I need to know, is there any one thing that you are specifically aware of as you think about it? What might be one of those things? Well, I'm fascinated.
I mean, essentially they describe the difficulty of, we talked about robotics, right? And how long it's kind of taken us to figure out how to make a robot kind of move like a human. And movement is physics. And so, and calculations and math. And so it's hard, but we've been doing it, right?
Sure.
We don't even know where to begin with emotion. You get what I'm saying?
Oh.
We don't even know where
you talk about people in general?
Yeah, for instance, people, right? But yeah, just like, they need the computer to figure out how to do that because we don't even know where to start. So essentially, there's already a non-starter in a sense.
I hear you.
Right? But I also don't necessarily think that's the thing, right? That might not be the thing. The computer might just be able to read faces, and you plug a million movies into this thing and a million pictures and whatever. A million's a small number. Just the whole planet's worth of information. It eventually goes, okay, sad is this. Right. And it can figure it out, and it can replicate it.
Yeah.
And it might even program itself to be able to be sad, right?
Sure.
again, these are just things we don't know. You know? Because it's requiring us to depend on something else doing it that we said, hey, now do this.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of the big when you say, is there a thing? The thing is we can't know.
Yeah.
You know?
Because I apologize because I keep coming back to movies. I don't know. I haven't even seen that many. But I think of it in the terms of the old Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, to where there was this glitch. If you want to live. Well, no, there was this glitch that made him, the Terminator, and other people could notice if you looked closely that he wasn't able to assimilate to empathy and emotional, to where those emotional dynamics tended to give him away. Mm-hmm. So if someone was observant enough, they could tell the Terminators from actual people because they were just unable to connect with certain emotional cues.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point you were bringing up to a certain degree. It's like that becomes an obstacle. Mm-hmm. But there again, that's on my current level of thinking. But that's, I'm in agreement with you. And I guess in some ways, I'm honestly surprised that we are in as much agreement as we are from a IT person to a non-technical person.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's just so theoretical that it's hard. It's not about IT versus.
No, I hear you.
It's like you said, it's philosophy, right? So that, yeah. It's interesting, you're talking about the Terminator. Mm-hmm. That's probably another challenge, which is kind of human ambition to leverage what we've gotten so far, right? Like, sure. Oh, you mean you can create a machine that will do that?
Right.
Terminate, da-da-da-da-da. Well, that's good enough, and kind of take that off and kind of wreck things, right? That kind of sets us back.
Yeah.
Again, seems biblical to me in the sense of like, we can't control ourselves and we wreck our own progress as a result of that. We set ourselves back 100 years, doesn't surprise me at all if that were to happen. You know what I mean?
No, I do. I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah,
because our ambitions are to be like God.
Yeah.
And we
like
can see how he frustrated in that example.
Yeah.
And who's to say that he can't? And I would say there might be I'm not saying that individuals who tend to, promote or philosophize about artificial intelligence might be anti-God, but I think we factor that in, that God is, we see God as our higher power, Jesus Christ is our higher power, of course, but, being able to recognize anything that would be lifted up to be higher than that will tend to experience frustration.
Yeah. Yep.
From my perspective.
Yeah. And I agree completely. It's, back to the scenario about us kind of ambitiously ruining our own progress. Speaking of movies, that made me think of Jurassic Park, right?
Okay, sure.
Where they create this amazing park from science and they have these dinosaurs, but that one guy.
Yeah.
That's one company.
Yep.
And then the storm happens and he drops the thing in the mud or whatever and then, sets up the next 22 movies in the franchise, right?
Yeah.
But it's basically frustrated the progress of what was going to be fascinating, amazing progress for us, and we went backwards because human ambition. I just think it's a good. Movies are a great, philosopher's tool.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, because they create this picture of what it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting as we're kind of processing this. I'm processing it a little more with you. It's like, it's funny because how movies themselves create this balance, if you will.
Yeah.
Between we go to other planets, we conquer those, and I'm just thinking of different clips that I've seen, and then on the other end is this process to where all technology doesn't exist and we're back to bartering, and that kind of thing. And then you can put zombies in there too.
Oh yeah, of course. AI zombies.
Exactly. But so that being said, I appreciate the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to think about, and I think there's a part of our world that has artificial intelligence and that, and unless something major happens, from electrical standpoint, I still think power would be a interesting dynamic to talk about
Yeah,
with
but
somebody.
if you put something on that problem
Mm-hmm.
smarter than you
Mm-hmm.
without the tiring aspect,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how big of a problem is it?
I'm not saying
We don't know.
Yeah,
We don't know
exactly.
how big of a problem it is.
Yeah,
It might be huge still, and your point is 100% valid.
but
But you
yeah,
give one step above, quote unquote, our intelligence, maybe even in the A and I sense, right?
sure,
In this one way, they're just vastly superior, and they solve the power problem so fast, right?
right. Well, and
Um,
I think that is a real human dynamic, is that we resist change.
mm-hmm.
To where even the power itself, if something could be generated, I was initially thinking of solar. Yes, that can be a portable source of power. And yet I'm also thinking, okay, we use fossil fuels right now, but if something could be designed that actually ran off oxygen like a human,
Mm-hmm.
or,
Yeah.
hydrogen, oxygen, something along that line as a source,
Yeah.
that would fix that
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
to some degree. And I think, some of this information is out there, I think the technology in some of these things is out there,
Mm-hmm.
but, we would have to remechanize so many things to shift our cars. And, it's just some of I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but, I do believe that some of that technology does get squelched to a degree,
Mm-hmm.
just because, yeah, it's not efficient.
Hmm.
Well, it's more efficient, but,
Yeah.
it does away with the status quo. And I think,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and you
that's
think
another
about,
topic.
yeah, you think, again, tying it back in, though,
Hmm.
with AI, again, quote unquote, smarter than us,
Hmm.
would go, the emotional aspect of, the political aspect of, well, we have to go green, we have to be electric now,
Hmm.
it's kind of like, well, we put all our eggs in this basket, so, so we
Yes.
have to, the AI would go, that's silly,
Yes.
let's do it this way. Well, and I
Yes.
don't know what this way is,
Which
but
might have certain aspects of this, but might
yeah, it
have
might
certain
be,
aspects of the old
yeah,
school
keep the
that we
combustion engines around for a while till we
exactly,
made this so good that it then becomes an obvious replacement.
or a
And
hybrid, if
right,
necessary.
right,
Yes.
whatever, right. That's what I
Yes.
mean. We just
Exactly.
don't know, and you take away the politics because it's quote unquote
Yes.
smarter than us and doesn't need politics.
Well, and I
Then it
think,
can choose the best thing based on the best thing, not based on politics.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I would dare say part of AI in some ways would do away with nostalgia,
Hmm.
because I think, yes, it's a
It
learning
depends
from the
on if
past.
the AI cares about us or not. And that's what his whole second post is about, is essentially what happens if it's a good guy and what happens if it's a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
And again, just philosophy, right? But if it's a benevolent
Hmm.
robotic dictator, it might go, nostalgia's good for these guys. They need a
I
little bit of that to be the most productive they can be.
Yeah.
You know?
Hmm. It's
Right?
interesting philosophy,
Yeah,
as you
it
say.
is, yeah.
Yeah. So, and here again, it would come back to, from my perspective, can human design do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is human design, to the degree that it's human, flawed in some way?
Right. That's
Based on sin nature, if I may.
that's kind of where, you asked me what the thing is. I don't
Mhm.
know. I don't know of a thing except that, right? Like,
Sure.
to me, that is a thing.
That
It's
is
a
a
big thing.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
a
we're
big
talking
thing.
about, basically leapfrogging human intelligence to where that sin nature isn't the blocker. And I'm saying, yeah, but we got to get through that one. You're saying,
Yeah.
right? Like,
No, I hear you.
that's not a non-issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I would come back to that altruistic dynamic. And
Yeah, it's, altruism,
Mm-hmm.
all true, right? Like,
Right.
there's no such thing in the human perspective, because even when you think you're thinking altruistically, you have a bent.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that bent important?
Mm-hmm.
Why is saving old ladies from getting hit when they cross the street important?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Well, that's just because.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know why. It's because God created us to honor life and His creation. But if you take away God, it's like, well, that person is close to death. She, probably will die in the next decade.
Mm-hmm.
And she's consuming resources that could be leveraged in a better way, And she's blocking the cars that becomes inefficient, right?
Sure.
And so the system that's supposed to work perfectly is now, blocked by this imperfect old thing that should go away. Right?
Yeah. No, it's creating a parameter.
Yeah.
And therefore she's outside this parameter.
Right.
And therefore her value is diminished.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that, is yeah.
And so altruism, it's like, what do you base that on if you don't have a moral center based on a God-given moral center, right?
Sure.
Like his
and
values.
Can you have
and
altruism?
The reason I think that's valuable is because he said it's valuable and he knows better than I do, right?
Yeah.
That's how we operate, right?
Sure.
But if you don't have that, then it's like, how do you determine highest values?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's going to look a lot different than what we currently universally think is a good value. Don't murder people. Don't murder old people. Don't murder, young people. I guess we kind of...
Any people.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently we're slipping up on that one, right? So we're already seeing some of that progression of when we lose what, when our values don't align with what God's values are, we're, sometimes we think, well, that's not real life, right? So you go into a fetus stage, and I guess I'm arguing that, like, the old lady crossing the street, we're not that far from that, saying that's not valuable either,
I hear you.
But
yeah,
I don't want to get into that.
And there again, I think some of that comes back to, what is the earth and what are people? And if people are just biological beings,
right?
That have no actual purpose,
right?
Then
right.
Yes, there's a formula for that.
Yeah. And there's so much philosophy that's left out of this post in terms of why are we who we are?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. Because that should tip some information our way about we're unique for a reason, and there's something going on here that doesn't, but it's evolution. Well, I guess that's,
Yeah. Well, thank you for the topic, Justin.
You're welcome.
It's yes, it's been a
share
fun...
with you my artificial intelligence.
I appreciate that. Yes, indeed. And anything else you would like to add for a wrap up?
It will be interesting to see how the AI sees it.
Oh, fair
we'll
enough.
have to interview it.
How does it, and that's how today. That's how we see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.